I love these old Topper Johnny Lightning castings. This one from 1970 is the Triple Threat. Maybe this one's called the Triple Threat because it's missing two engines and it's kid painted. Okay, that's probably not what they had in mind. But this thing really is kind of beat to hell. It had the exhaust for one of the engines. It was missing two engines. Whoop! Yeah, got to make sure that's tight before I go to drill. Uh, but I had some 3D printed engines that I thought would look good on this. And so I thought, well, let's take a whack at it and see what we can come up with. I love the look of the casting. I think the lines are just really neat, as opposed to some Johnny Lightning castings that, man, like a couple of them that I've done recently, one looks like a disposable razor and one of them looked like a piece of pipe. So this has a lot better look to it. Has that tiny little glass in there that it doesn't even cover all the way across the front. But I had to drill it to get it out of there. They have a post holding that thing in place. So drilled that, and it's old and brittle and has all kinds of things working against it. But fortunately, there was enough of it there that I could work with it and work around it, as you'll see coming up. I decided I'm not going to try and redo those wheels that are on there, but I am going to replace it with Johnny Lightning wheels. I decided to rip the bearings off of this thing. Yeah, rip is probably the wrong term. I straightened the axle out. The little hook on the axle, straighten that out so that I could pull the bearings off, so that in the odd chance I actually want to replace bearings on a Johnny Lightning casting in the future, I could. I'd have extras that way. And I'm building up quite the supply of bits and pieces of Johnny Lightning castings. So the axle that's on there, the axles on the new Johnny Lightning wheel sets are thicker than the original axles. So I end up pulling that wire out of there. And I do the same on the back. I pull those bearings off, pull the axle out, same as I did on the front. It's an interesting casting in that, and I don't know how well you'll see it, but you see how there's more on the left driver's side of the chassis than there is on the right U.S. passenger side. It's almost like a steering arm for the front, I think is what they intended to do. I think that's what that piece is doing there. Like there's a single connection to that front steering to move that axle back and forth, I believe is what they have in the design. There I'm throwing the glass in super clean because there was some paint on it. Both kid paint. It's a weird thing on these original Topper Johnny Lightnings. I'm not sure what the process was when they painted them, but sometimes they have original paint that somehow is on the glass. And oddly, it almost seems like it's in the glass. It's hard to explain. But there you see me drilling the hole for the axle, just slightly larger. I didn't want to basically groove that out, put an axle tube in when it was absolutely unnecessary. I've done it before on these Topper Johnny Lightnings. I just make that hole slightly larger. It doesn't need to be that much larger. It's easy enough to do, and it's much cleaner than throwing an axle tube on there. You're using that original path for the axle, and it really works out well. There you see the original wheels, and that's what I'm going to throw on there. Again, they're from the Johnny Lightning wheel kits. And so what you end up doing is you have to be careful, but you pop the front of the wheel off. The chrome section will pop out. So far, I found it's best to do that from the back of the wheel. It's open, and you can push on that chrome portion to pop it out. And I'll just use a small pick or a small screwdriver to do that. There I'm just roughly taking a look at those wheels on the casting. Obviously, the casting has been stripped at this point. And I'm really liking the looks of those. It's not a real rider look. There you see with the chrome section popped out of those. And then I just clip off the end of the axle, slide that through the opening, and then I just put a very tiny piece, super tiny little piece of axle tube on the end of the axle sticking out the other side, and CA glue it in place. And you've seen me do that in other videos on other Johnny Lightning builds. But I like the Johnny Lightning wheels. I don't know, maybe it's just in my mind that I think they look better. But I almost feel like it's a oddly more true restoration in my mind, because at least I'm using Johnny Lightning wheels. That being said, it doesn't mean I'm not going to slap something else on the next one. But for this one, it gave me the warm fuzzies using the Johnny Lightning wheels. And I picked up, quite a few of those not all that long ago, with the intent to use them on a lot of these Johnny Lightning builds. So I like the look. And the body, it had some weird spots on it. Like basically at the very back end, there was just this weird rough area on the casting, really rough area that needed to be sanded down, filed down, really smoothed out. I took so much metal off of that excess back there, that then it had like a thin little lip to it that I also needed to file off. And that basically that very back end was the roughest part. The other areas just needed typical cleanup. This casting was not beat up play-wise. It looked like hell from whatever that paint combination was that they used on it. But otherwise it wasn't bad. I did take that bottom under the front axles down a little bit as well. Took some of the metal off of that to make sure that those front wheels would clear the ground. That the front end of the chassis wouldn't drag. So dip that in the IPA, because I end up hitting that with the aluminum chrome paint. Because a lot of the metal on the Johnny Lightnings does not polish up well. And so I thought that was easiest for this one. Also, I dipped this one in IPA to clean it off. And, I do that before I take anything to paint. And the paint, I hit it with Metalcast red, because this was originally red. Then went over it with the Worth Clear, but I do need to explain that. The front windshield, I brushed gauzy onto it. It would have been difficult to dip. And then when I put that windshield in, I used the resin pen to resin in around it to fill it in, because it did not fill that open area. The paint. So, what do you think of the paint? Some people are going to hate it, but when I painted this originally, I hit it with the Metalcast, thought it was looking good, took a look at it, and it had, I paint outside, and so it had a couple of dust specks in it. So frustrated, I picked those out, and I looked at it and I thought, this thing has some really sexy lines to it. And I thought, I am just going to saturate this thing with Metalcast paint, intentionally getting it to pool. And I know some of you are going to look at that and go, man, that's a shoddy paint job. That's got pooling. And the red Metalcast doesn't pool anything like the orange does. The orange is horrible. It's difficult to paint that and not get pooling. You have to be super careful. Those are the 3D printed engines that I did hit with the chrome pin. But I intentionally let the paint pool because something I've noticed before is when it does that, sometimes depending upon the body lines, it really exaggerates the body lines. It calls attention to the body lines. There you see where we originally started. And as you can tell, this was a variety of colors. The actual color is that red that you see there. Everything else has been added. It's kid painted for the rest of it. So that's where it started. And you'll see it with the Metalcast paint. You can kind of see how, like in that front area, you see how it's kind of pooled in that area. And it's pooled in different sections of the body. But, God, I like the look. And I think it really highlights, it darkens the area. Where it's pooled, it's darkened. And it accentuates the highlights on the curves to me. So I'm really glad I did this. Yeah, I was going to have to strip it if I didn't do this. So I thought there's nothing to lose. Let's give this a try. So I let the paint pool, and I love the look of that. I'm thrilled with it. And then, hitting it with the Worth Clear afterwards. But, there's some body designs you can't let pool. Fortunately, this was one of them I could. So, I hope you all like this build as much as I do. Thanks for watching these videos. Everybody stay safe and healthy out there. Let me know what you think of the pooled paint, and I'll catch you in the next one.